Hello, welcome to CubsPS Plus, a Northside Numbers Game, a weekly podcast that dives headfirst into the analysis of hot topics driving Chicago Cubs baseball. I'm your host, Mike Waller, a lifelong Cub fan, full-time baseball stat nerd, and now again a youth baseball coach. CubsPS Plus is part of the Bleacher Bunch Productions on the Fans First Sports Network, an exciting group of shows including the Bleacher Bunch, the Sun Ranto Show, Cup of Cubby Blue, Baseball Rabbit Hole, and Bricks Behind the Ivy. The Bleacher Bunch feed is available wherever it is you get your podcasts, and CubsPS Plus is always available ad-free to Bleacher Bunch Patreon supporters, patreon.com/BleacherBunch, where you can support the show and find a variety of benefits, including one of the best Discord groups I've ever been a part of, Talking Baseball. So support us and come check it out. In addition to the podcast feeds, you can also find me on Twitter or X, Instagram, TikTok, Threads, Blue Sky, and YouTube, all at CubsPS Plus. The spin on the baseball metric, OPS Plus. Love the pod or hate it? Please drop a review wherever it is you find your podcasts. If you've done that, thank you so much. Maybe you can share this episode with a friend. It's April 29th. The Cubs are 17-12 and start their first series against a team with a losing record tonight. On the whole, I'm loving this team so far. But what is this bullpen? Let's discuss. Are you ready? I'm ready. Here we go. Welcome to episode 108. We'll skip the stats or jersey numbers for this one. Happy Elia Day. If by some chance you're actually listening to my podcast of all things and don't know what I'm referencing, boy, do I have a gift for you. Go to YouTube, TikTok, or even Google, enter his name. You're going to find an absolute gem of a post-game press conference rant. I'm not going to get into the specifics of it. I usually keep this podcast clean, but Elia did not keep it clean. Basically, he laid into, let's set the scene. It was the 1983 Cubs. That team thought maybe they could be better than they wound up being. There was a bit of a precursor in the 1984, which was obviously a big year for the Cubs. That team was missing some pieces, but they got off to a really bad start. And Elia had not done well in the 1982 season. He was feeling some pressure and getting a lot of criticism from fans. There were some boos out that day. I even forget the context of the game that he said this after. It was obviously a loss. He was not happy about it. But he just ripped into the media, the fans, everybody, talking about how, 85% of this is back when the Cubs only played day baseball, talking about how 85% of the world goes to work and the other 15% go to Wrigley Field and yell at him and get on his players. So he was defending his players, did not go well. Elia did not survive the season. Jim Fry came in. Dallas Green made some other changes, picked up some other players. Ryan Sandberg happened in 1984, and history, the rest is history, as they say. But I couldn't think of anything better than calling out Elia today. So happy Elia Day, everybody. So let's get into this team. So I talked about in the open, the Cubs are 17-12. The Cubs have played the hardest schedule in baseball by miles and miles and miles. There's a tweet going around today. It's absolutely factual. The Cubs they listed the number of games played. Again, each team has played against teams with a losing record as of today. The Cubs have 0. The Mets lead the way with 20. The Cubs' April schedule was ridiculous. Now, the Cubs do finish out. They go to Pittsburgh tonight. So tonight we'll start a series with a team with a losing record. The Cubs are not going to get Paul Skeens. So if the Cubs are the team that they've shown themselves to be in April, hopefully they can certainly take this series. Would love a sweep, but it's hard to go in anytime expecting a sweep. I did not expect a sweep in Oakland, even though I didn't think this Athletics team is as good as they're playing right now. And let's go back to that. So the Cubs schedule, obviously they opened in Japan and lost 2. So ever since domestic opening day, the Cubs are actually 17-10. And we're 17-8 before losing the last 2 games of the Philadelphia series. And it's interesting to look at because on the one hand, the Cubs have had some games with absolute bullpen implosions. The Cubs have had some games where the bullpen really stepped it up when a starter did not go the distance and they were able to keep the team in the game. The offense clearly has been the part of this team that has carried things so far. The Cubs lead baseball in scoring. They're up in the top 5 in basically every offensive category you can think of. Starting pitching has been pretty solid. Has not gotten a ton of depth, which has led to some of the bullpen issues. But I want to step back and, right now, it's funny. The Cubs lost the last 2 games of the Philadelphia series. That's only the 3rd series they've lost this year. They got swept in Japan by the Dodgers. They lost the series at San Diego, and then they lost the series at home 2 out of 3 to Philadelphia. All good teams. So the Cubs have played the Dodgers 7 times, They have played the Padres 6 times. They have played the Diamondbacks 7 times. They have played the Rangers 3 times. And they have played the Athletics 3 times. Of those teams, you would expect the A's to be the easy one, and they kind of were. The Cubs dominated that series. But it's also worth noting that the Athletics right now are a game and a half out of first place in the West, and they're a game over 500. So this is not the same A's team that we've seen the past several years. We'll see how good they can be. I don't know that they're going to be a major contender, but right now they're playing pretty good baseball. To hear things, as a fan, we like to, well, we don't like to, we don't like some of the stuff at all, but we see patterns, we see certain things, and there's a lot of, I've seen this show before, I know how it ends. And the bullpen is one of those areas this year, and I really want to dig in on this one. So the bullpen particularly stood out to me after the weekend series, especially Sunday night's game. Sunday night's game against Philadelphia. Let's get back to it. Let me get the box score up. But the Cubs, I wouldn't even say the bullpen exactly blew that one. They lost the game. The game went to extra innings. But we go back to the full schedule and we look at that game. The Cubs lose 3-1 to Philly. Philly gets 2 in the 10th. But and I see a lot of talk about, well, this bullpen, the Cubs got to, blow up this bullpen. And we'll get into some bigger stats here in a minute, but I just kind of want to set the stage with this game. So in this particular game, it was Jameson Taillon against Aaron Nola. 2 good pitchers going against each other. Not great offensive conditions in Wrigley Field, and both pitchers pitched well. So not surprisingly, both starters went 7 innings. Now the Phillies got 3 lockdown innings from their bullpen. The Cubs got 2 lockdown innings from their bullpen. So the Cubs went to Porter Hodge in the 8th. He was clean. I guess it wasn't clean. He gave up 1 walk. Presley walked 1 guy, but both guys looked pretty dominant. Never felt like, Hodge walked the leadoff guy, then got a double play. Presley walked 1 guy, but he was pretty nasty in that one. Julian Merriweather came in, not going to make excuses. I thought early, his first couple hitters, I thought he got squeezed a little bit, which then set him off. But clearly he did not have great command. He walked 3 guys in 2/3 of an inning, gave up 2 runs. Only one of them's earned because the Manfred Man or the Ghost Run or whatever we want to call it in clown ball is not an earned run. So he goes 2/3 of an inning. Caleb Teobar comes in to get the last out. And in that game, the bullpen, did they blow that game? It's hard to say they did. They did. The bullpen never had a lead to hold. They were trying to keep the Cubs in the game, and the Cubs were not scoring against the Phillies. And we'll talk about we'll do some bullpen comparisons in a minute because the Dodgers and Phillies are actually really interesting cases to compare against the Cubs this year. But the Cubs, so that got everybody talking, and it takes us back to last year. So last year, the Cubs had a pretty good April, and they had a disastrous May. But even in April, you could see the signs coming with this bullpen. Adbert Alzolay was not right. Now he would kind of take a little bit of time to really fully implode and get to the point where he'd go on the injured list. But I talk about imploding. He wasn't healthy. I don't think he was ever healthy last season. I don't think he was healthy at the end of the season before. He would wind up having Tommy John surgery. Now he's in the Mets organization while he rehabs. And the Cubs' number 2 option at closer was Hector Neris, who was not solid. He had some blown saves early in the season. That kind of continued during the year. The Cubs did wind up getting the bullpen righted, but they only righted the ship after a really disastrous April and a June that was not that much better. So the Cubs basically played themselves out of the race, tried to claw back in with a revamped bullpen, picked up guys like Tyson Miller and Jorge Lopez and made some trades for Nate Pearson and Jack Neely. And they just had a bunch of guys come up. We saw Porter Hodge come in and show out. So they had some guys step up, and that's what the Cubs are going to need right now. And at the end of the episode, we'll talk about what the Cubs can do next. But let's get into it. So looking at the Cubs bullpen they're through 29 games right now. To do a comparison with last year, the Japan series makes things odd. So I'm comparing this year through yesterday, which was April 28th, to last year through April 28th. So some of the teams, numbers of games, things like that are going to be a little bit different, but it's pretty like to like. And so looking at the 2025 bullpen, we'll look at a few different things. So let's look first at blown saves. The team that leads the league in most blown saves is Philadelphia at 7. I don't expect that to continue. They actually have what should be a pretty good bullpen on paper. They've been good the last several years. They have some interesting guys. They're not off to a great start. They're tied with Philly, leading the league with 7 blown saves. Cubs are at 6 next, followed by Boston, Minnesota, Toronto, Arizona, Atlanta, the Dodgers, and Pittsburgh with 5 each. So right now we're so early in the season. Sample sizes are small. There's just not a lot of room for separation. Teams that have not blown it, save. Everybody has blown a save. Baltimore and San Diego have only blown 1 each. Detroit's blown 2. San Francisco and a host of teams have blown 3 and then 4. So there's not much separation there. And we compare that to last year. So the Cubs are 3rd in the league in blown saves, which you could counter argue as effectively they're 28th in blown saves. Only 2 teams worse than them. And last year, the Cubs, through this point in the season, had also blown 6 saves. And they were 9th or 21st, however you want to count it. So they were not great. By this point last year, Edward Alzolay already had 4 blown saves. But I want to talk about blown saves specifically for a minute. I did this a couple times last year. I just want to reiterate, a lot of times people will look at the blown save stat and think of that as a number of games that the bullpen has lost for the team. So those would be, for the Cubs, that'd be 6 losses hung on the bullpen, at least. And then we can get into the other games that, maybe the bullpen allowed a close game to turn into a blowout, or took a game that, wasn't a close game. And then one guy, and this happened to Porter Hodge against the Padres, that game, it was Arizona. I actually have that here. It was against Arizona. It was April 18th. He goes 2/3 of an inning, gives up 4 hits, 6 runs. Nobody gets a blown save in that game, but the Cubs had a lead that was blown. But when Porter Hodge came in the game, it was not a save situation, so there was no save to blow. So that's a kind of an oddball one. I guess you could say that's 7 then for the Cubs, but I could probably go through every other team and, at least over the course of the season, find other games like that. But the Cubs do not have 6 losses from blown saves. The Cubs are actually 3-3 in games where they blew a save. So let's go through it. So Porter Hodge and Brad Keller lead the way for the Cubs with 2 blown saves each. Caleb Thielbar has 1, and Eli Morgan has 1. And let's just go chronologically. So the first one was March 30th. It was Eli Morgan. He gave up 6 runs against Arizona in the 8th. That was a Sunday game that the Cubs bullpen just completely trashed and lost that game because of the bullpen. 100%. I will put that game on the bullpen with no concerns. The next one came, actually the next 2 were Porter Hodge. They were April 6th and April 8th. April 6th was against the Dodgers, or against San Diego. He gave up a run. They blew the game, and then Ryan Presley actually lost the game in the 9th by giving up another run. So Porter Hodge came in with a 1-run lead in the 8th inning, allows San Diego to tie it, and then Presley gave up a run to lose it in the 9th. 2 days later, Hodge comes into the 7th inning of a game, finishes a dirty 7th inning, throws really well, gives up 1 run in the 8th. That allows Texas to tie the game, but then the Cubs would wind up coming back and winning that one. I think the Cubs scored 4 runs the next inning. So at this point now, the Cubs are 1-2 when they blow a save. The next blown save was 5 days later, Caleb Thielbar against LA. And this was a game, I think that was that 11-10 win. Kind of went back and forth, but Thielbar got the blown save. He blew that in the 6th, but the Cubs came back to win. So now they're 2-2. And then Brad Keller had the most recent 2. Both of them were blown in the 6th inning. April 14th, the very next day, from Thielbar's, he blew a lead in the 6th. And that's what you're going to look at. So to blow a save, you have to come into a save situation. A save situation is anything with basically speaking, there are some exceptions, but if you come into a situation where the lead is 3 runs or fewer and you're after the 5th inning, so some other pitcher is already on record for the win, potentially, you come in with the lead, you're either going to get a save, or if you get taken out of the game and you're successful in holding that lead, you get a hold. So On the 14th, Keller gave up a run, and then the Cubs would eventually lose that game. That was another bullpen kind of, I want to say implosion, but the bullpen did not pitch well that day. And then April 22nd, again against the Dodgers, he blew a lead in the 6th, got the blown save. Cubs came back to win. So the Cubs are 3-3 in blown saves. I also want to talk about, before we get into the team numbers, I want to talk about things like some of those rate stats, ERAs, WHIP, even Ks per nine, some of that kind of stuff. Right now, especially for relievers, we are in very early season 4. So when I look at the Cubs and I look at their reliever stats, the most anybody has pitched as a reliever is Porter Hodge with 13 2/3 innings. Ryan Presley has 12 innings. Brad Keller has 11 1/3. Julian Merriweather has 11. And then Caleb Tealbar has 10 1/3. So nobody's even thrown 15 innings. So we look at this and we see that Porter Hodge on the season has a 5.27 ERA. He has a WHIP of, I'm losing him here, going from one stat to the next, 1.32. Neither of those numbers are very good. But when you really break it down, if you go into Porter Hodge's game logs and take a look at his outings, he's only given up runs in 3 of the games he's pitched in, and he's been into 14 different games. So 11 times he's come in the game and not given up any runs. Ironically, as I noted, the one where he gave up 6 runs, so that inning he gave up. So Porter Hodge on the season, 13 2/3 innings, he's given up 12 hits, 8 runs, all earned, 6 walks, and 15 strikeouts. In that one game against Arizona on April 18th, he pitched 2/3 of an inning, gave up 4 hits, 6 runs, they were all earned, 2 walks, and 1 strikeout. That one game, and this is going to show how one outing from a reliever can completely blow up numbers. It applies to starters early in the season too, but because they will more typically go 5 to 8 innings, and nobody goes 8 innings hardly anymore, but 5 to 7 innings, they just build up that base rate so much faster than relief pitchers do. So without that one outing, take away the 2, I know you can't take anything away, the season is what it is, but I just want to show what the numbers would be without that and show how much it skews. Without that one outing against Arizona, Porter Hodge has thrown 13 innings, given up 8 hits, 2 earned runs, walked 4, and struck out 14. And then what that gives you is, instead of an ERA of 5.27, it's 1.38. Instead of a WHIP of 1.32, it's 0.92. So when you're looking at reliever ERAs, and we're still in April, even as we head into May, even sometimes as we get into June, you really have to kind of think about how often that guy's pitched and think about how consistent he's been. If there's a guy like Hodge, Brad Keller is similar. So if I look at Brad Keller's game log, he has pitched in 11 games. He's thrown 11 1/3 innings. And if I look at his game log, he's also only given up runs in 3 of those games. He gave up 2 runs against Arizona in his first appearance. He gave up a run to San Diego in that blown save I referenced on April 14th. And he had disaster of an outing against the Dodgers on April 22nd. That was his other blown save. In that outing, he went 1/3 of an inning, gave up 2 hits, 5 runs, 4 of them were earned, walked 2 guys. So, he put 4 guys on base. I think he hit a guy too. So basically everybody you put on scored. And so that can definitely skew those numbers. So when we talk about a certain pitcher, we look at a reliever. If they're pitching well, they're pitching well. So when you look at things like Ryan Presley's numbers are pretty good. He has no blown saves. He has the 1 loss that he lost in the 9th from a tie game. He's been a little shaky. That one, though, he's pitched 12 innings. He's given up 12 hits. He's only struck out 5. And he's walked 7. So he has put 19 guys on base in 12 innings, which is not what you're looking for. But compare that to Hodge. Even with that one outing, he's put 18 on base in 13 innings. But without that, other than that one day, he's only put 12 guys on in 13 innings, so a little less than 1 guy on base per inning. And you want to see trends. So did a guy get blown up early and now he's righting the ship and he's getting better? Did a guy pitch better earlier? Now he's trash. The problem with bullpens, especially early in the season, especially on a team that probably, well, no probably about it, did not do enough this offseason to build up starting pitching depth. Although right now, Colin Ray is pitching really well. Ben Brown looks a little shaky, but we'll see how it goes. This team is not going deep in games. It was nice to see Tyone go 7 Sunday night. Shota's had a game or two, I think, where he went fairly deep. But right now, this early in the season, you're not going to see that many games unless the starter is just on his game where the starter goes 7, 8 innings. Partly getting stretched out, partly just kind of, the weather tends to be a little bit cooler. It's just a little bit harder. Not up to mid-season form, as they say, because we're in April or ending April, heading into May. And if a starter only goes 5 and the Cubs are playing a close game, you have to cover 4 innings with that bullpen if you're going to win the game. Sometimes more if there are extra innings. So to do that, we typically see one guy might throw 2 innings, but to cover 4 innings, you're going to see 2, 3, 4 relievers. And it only takes one of them not being on their stuff to have it blow up. And that's one reason why you want those big dominant starting pitchers wherever you can get it. Look at Steele 2 years ago. I don't want to say routinely, but he pretty regularly went to the 7th inning, pitched 8 a couple times. That really tightens the game for your bullpen. And if the Cubs are going to rely on Porter Hodge, Ryan Presley, maybe Julian Merriweather late in games, we're going to tend to see, we're going to want to get to them with as few pitchers as possible. They're going to, at any point in time, there are a Major League roster can only have 13 starting pitchers or 13 pitchers at all. You got 5 starters. That leaves 8 in the bullpen. If you have to throw 4 guys, you could almost start getting into an A-day, B-day with who's available. Somebody's thrown 2 days in a row, now they're down. Or we had these 4 guys throw yesterday, now we're going to try to rely on these 4 guys over here. Now the ones at the end, Porter Hodge, Ryan Presley, we're going to see them go a little bit differently because they're going to be almost entirely based on a low-scoring close game late like we saw with Philly, or games where the Cubs have a small lead and they come in to hold it down. But let's get back into the comparisons. And talking about the blown saves before we get to the comparisons. Last year at this point, when the Cubs bullpen was imploding, it was a lot of, I already mentioned Adbert Alzolay had 4 blown saves by this point last year. That is him coming into the 9th or potentially the 10th. There might have been an extra inning game or 2 in there, where the Cubs had the lead and he lost that lead in the 9th. Those were wins that you're expecting your closer to come in and nail down. And nobody's going to be perfect, but you don't expect 4 blown saves in April. This year, Ryan Presley has no blown saves. The Cubs have lost a couple games late with the bullpen from tie games. The Cubs have blown some leads in the 6th and the 8th that resulted in losses. But the Cubs so far this year, knock on wood, it could happen tonight. It's going to happen at some point this season. The Cubs have not had a game where they have entered the 9th with the lead and lost the game. So that right there is the first thing I hang my hat on when I say this year's bullpen is not last year's bullpen. I understand all the arguments. I understand the feels. I understand the angst. I'm watching these games too. And I watched last year's games too, and it was maddening to see just time after time after time seeing them go. But the other thing I'll point out too is last year, the Cubs waited a surprisingly long time before they really made many moves. We've already seen a lot this year. The Cubs have already used 16 guys out of the bullpen. Hodge, Keller, Julian Merriweather, Tealbar, Presley have been up for the entire season, but we have also seen Jordan Wicks pulled up and used out of the pen. We've seen Colin Ray. He started the year in the pen. Now he's in the rotation because Steele's down. Ben Brown has pitched once out of the bullpen before he jumped into the starting rotation. We saw Gavin Hollowell absolutely dominate the Dodgers for 2 innings in a big win. The Cubs signed Drew Pomeranz, who hadn't pitched in a major league game since 2021. I think this is an error. It shows Ryan Brazier with 1 inning, but he's been injured, so I'm not sure. That's probably a scoring error. That inning probably belongs to somebody else. I'm looking at Fangraphs. We've seen Daniel Palencia come up from Iowa, and he's actually thrown reasonably well. Still got some command issues, but he seems to be getting it done more than he's not. Luke Little came up. horrendous command issues. He'll be back. I've got full faith in Luke Little. I think he's going to be a nasty reliever for a long time in this league. But he got one shot, and then he was optioned back down to Iowa. That was one where he walked the bases loaded, walked it a run. And that's just not, this is not what you're looking for. But he sorted it out last year. He actually looked really good by the time he got injured last year. So hopefully he'll get that settled. The Cubs will work it out. Ethan Roberts was down, has been up, is now back down. Nate Pearson started the season with the big club, so did Eli Morgan. Neither one of them pitched well at all. Nate Pearson is an ERA of 10.38, and Eli Morgan's is 12.27. I talk about small sample size and 1 inning throwing things off. Unless you're under like 5 innings, you don't get to an ERA of 10 or 12 because you had one bad outing. Those guys were not getting it done. Nate Pearson, his walks per 9 right now is 7.27. Eli Morgan was not getting swing and miss. Eli Morgan has shown he can do it in the bigs. Nate Pearson is a guy the Cubs traded for last year that has a ton of potential. He was a former first-round draft pick, was formerly a top prospect in baseball. He was available last year because he's never fully put it together. And maybe he never will, but he's got some very interesting stuff. He's a big guy, throws hard, as I like to say on this podcast. He fits that mold. He's just going to have to figure out the command issues. There were times last year in the second half where he looked really good. And then there are times he just doesn't have any idea where the ball's going. So I think the Cubs are starting to settle into roles. You're seeing Ryan Presley on the back end. We'll see how it goes. At some point this year, we may see Porter Hodge take that role and see them flip. We have also already seen a day where Ryan Presley was down and Porter Hodge came in and got the save. So that was good to see. Julian Merriweather, Sunday night aside, has looked really good. He did not have command that game. Like I said, I think he got squeezed a little bit early on, but he lost it after that. So he was not able to battle through, which maybe tells me that he just didn't have the ability to throw strikes that day because getting squeezed was about as good as it got. Caleb Thielbar kind of got off to a rough start, but has largely been good. And he's been solid for Minnesota. I know he's old, but he's a lefty. He's figuring some things out. So I think the Cubs have got their kind of 7th, 8th, 9th inning kind of settled. Brad Keller has been quite good for the most part outside that one big game that he blew up in. I've said since the offseason, and Sarah and I talked about it on the last episode, redoing the offseason, I would not have taken the path that Jed took. I would have spent more money on the bullpen. Now, we can also make the case that the Cubs did go for Tanner Scott. They went in hard. They offered him a contract that was worth more present value dollars than the offer the Dodgers gave him. But he opted to become a Dodger. I don't know where the Cubs stood with other guys. Maybe there's some other guys they made competitive offers with, but for the most part, you did not hear the Cubs discussed with top relievers outside of a couple guys, and they both went to the Dodgers. I would have aimed for, I talked all offseason about AJ Minter. He's a guy I really liked, coming from Atlanta, lefty, power arm, big guy in that Braves bullpen the last few years for those good teams. I would have made a lot of sense to pay that higher level and go get a guy like that just to give you more depth, push everybody else down a level. At that point, maybe they're not trading a prospect for Ryan Presley. They're probably not. Or maybe they still get Ryan Presley to close, and now you've got Hodge and Minter for the 8th inning, plus Merriweather and maybe Brad Keller. Maybe you still take a flyer on Brad Keller. I don't know. But while I wouldn't have gone this direction, I still think the Cubs have a really interesting set of arms in that pen. And the Cubs have a lot of potential talent in Iowa right now working through it. The Cubs just brought up Tom Cosgrove. He has not pitched yet. We'll see what he winds up doing. So I like what this bullpen can be. They're not there yet. So let's take a look at where they are in some of the league standings. So when you look at the Cubs through 29 games, they're 6th in innings pitched. Last year at this point, they were 4th. So again, that's a remnant of, number one, you're probably playing a lot of close games. If you're not playing a lot of close games, it gives you a chance to kind of throw in whoever out of the bullpen, let some guy eat 3 innings and go. Or maybe you just leave your starter in to kind of go that extra inning. But mostly it tells you the starters are not getting deep. So compared to the rest of the league, the Cubs are needing more bullpen innings than most. When you look at strikeouts per nine, last year they were 15th at 8.74. This year they're actually a little bit lower than that. They're 26th out of 30 teams with 7.53 Ks per nine innings. That is kind of the story of what the Cubs bullpen has been the last few years. And that's one where if you're one who wants to say this is last year's bullpen all over again, that's one where I'm kind of with you. The Cubs have not found enough swing and miss in the bullpen. Porter Hodge is kind of that guy. Julian Merriweather is that guy. Ryan Presley has not been that guy. He's had a couple outings lately where he's shown the ability to get a little bit more whiff. But when you come in, when you're asking a guy to come in the 6th, 7th, 8th inning, dirty inning, got guys on base, maybe it's 2nd and 3rd, 1 out. If you can get swing and miss, you really up your chances. Because any ball in play, ground ball hit the opposite way. If you've got the infield in, it doesn't take a ton to get the ball through the infield. Sacrifice fly. There are all kinds of things that can happen on balls in play that just can't if you get a strikeout. So the Cubs continue to look for more swing and miss in the bullpen. And that's one area where they have stepped back this year. And I want to see that improve this year. When you look at walks, that's been an issue. If you're a Bleacher Bunch supporter and you get our Cubs pods that we do after every game, that's another one of the perks, along with a great Discord channel. Danny Rocket, Michael Cotton, and I, and some others mix in here and there to do a post-game podcast. It's short. It's between 15 and 30 minutes, depending on the game and what there was to talk about. We break the game down. One thing I say over and over and over again, for starters, it's really more about pitch efficiency, being able to keep that pitch count down so that you can get into the 6th, into the 7th, potentially into the 8th inning. For relievers, it's coming in and not walking guys. And last year, the Cubs bullpen at this point in the season was 29th in baseball, walking 4.68 per 9 innings. This year, they're 26th in baseball. Their walk rate's actually a little higher than last year. It's 4.74. So they're basically walking the same number of guys. And this is something that's come up in several of my Cubs spots. I had a stretch where those Sunday games that the Cubs bullpen was blowing, those were my games to recap. So yay me, I enjoyed that thoroughly. But it lets me keep hitting on that point. So the Cubs right now are not getting enough swing and miss, and they're walking too many guys out of the bullpen. When they have issues, that's almost always the root cause of the issue. When you look at things like ERA, FIP, expected FIP, some of that gets into kind of random innings, randomness, whatever. But the Cubs last year were 22nd in ERA, 24th in FIP, and 24th in expected FIP. This year, the Cubs are 28th in ERA, 22nd in FIP, and 28th in expected FIP. So the bullpen has not done enough, but because we're still on small sample size alert here, I will throw back the Cubs have had a number of games where it's been 1 inning, where that ridiculous game against Arizona where they gave up 10 runs and still managed to come back and win the games. They gave up 10 runs in the 8th. They had a game against Arizona where they gave up 8 runs in the 8th, I think. They had a game against San Diego where the bullpen blew up at the end. You take those away, a lot of the rest of the games, they've actually been pretty good. So I want you to think about this, but take the good with the bad. There have also been some games the Cubs have won in low-scoring fashion where I remember one Ben Brown start, he was not efficient with his pitches. He was only able to get through 4, so the bullpen had to take 5 innings, and they shut the Padres down and won the game. So there's this give and take. And I don't know what the Cubs bullpen is yet this season, but because they're making moves, because the Cubs have shown the ability to get the bullpen right in season in the past, because the Cubs really appear to be saying and doing all the things to show that they're trying to be competitive this year. Well, since the season started, we could argue about what they spent in the offseason, and we talked about that in the offseason. We'll get back to that at some point, but I'm not going to get into it today. But the last 8 games the Cubs have kind of illustrate this point about there are some blowups, but otherwise there's some games where it's gone really well. So one thing here, just to kind of illustrate the point about bullpens and the good games and the bad and how they mix together, is let's talk about this homestand. It was 3 against Arizona, and it was 2 against LA, and then 3 against Philly. And so we go back to the first game of the homestand. That's that just insane game. I was on spring break, but it was absolute insanity. The Cubs won the game 13-11, but the bullpen imploded. They gave up 10 runs in the 8th inning, as I referenced earlier. In that game, it was a 2-1 game, I think, for a long time. Really low scoring until the game just got absolutely drunk in the last inning. But the Cubs bullpen in that game threw 4 1/3 innings, gave up 10 hits, 10 runs, walked 3, got the win because of reasons. Then the next game, game 2, the Cubs won that game, and the bullpen had to go 5 innings. So in that game, the starter did not go deep. I think that was a Ben Brown start, if I'm remembering correctly. Let me take a quick look. It was, that was Colin Ray, I think. No, it was Ben Brown. He went 4 innings, gave up 3 hits, 1 run, walked 4, struck out 6. But because he walked 4, back to my point about being efficient with your pitches, he was not able to go deep in the game. So the Cubs had the lead, but he wasn't able to get through 5. The bullpen had to eat the rest of that. Teobar threw 2 innings. Brad Keller threw 1, and Palencia threw the last 2. But in that game, the Cubs bullpen threw 5 innings, gave up 1 hit, 1 run, 1 walk, 4 strikeouts, and got a pretty easy win. In the last game against Arizona, in that one, Cubs got the loss in extra innings, but the bullpen had to take 6 innings. They lost in 11. Bullpen had to cover 6. And we look at that one on the whole, the Cubs bullpen threw 6 innings, gave up 5 hits, 2 unearned runs, no walks, 5 strikeouts. Now that's a game where Jordan Wicks was up, and Jordan Wicks came in the 10th, as I recall. Yeah, he threw the last 2 innings, threw the 10th and the 11th. And it was a 1-1 game. So the bullpen had no margin for error this entire game. And in that one, Jameson Taillon went 5 innings, gave up 3 hits, gave up 1 run, only walked 2, struck out 6. In that one, he threw 87 pitches. So he got through 5. It was not as efficient as he could have been. Some of it is you tend to run up bigger pitch counts when you're striking out more, and he struck out quite a few for him that inning. But, Julian Merriweather threw a clean 6th. Ethan Roberts came in, threw a clean 7th. Porter Hodge was a scoreless 8th. Brian Presley was a scoreless 9th. And of those guys, there were no walks. Merriweather gave up 2 hits, but Roberts, Hodge, and Presley were all clean. So at that point, the bullpen, through 9 innings, killed it. The Padres had a total of 5 hits, and none of them came after the 6th. Jordan Wicks came in. You've got the Manfred man on second base. He makes the error. Well, I guess it was technically Nico Horner's error. There was the error on the sacrifice bunt that might have changed things. So that guy got on, came around to score. So 2 unearned runs. Wicks gave up 3 hits. In this case, he did not walk guys. He just got hit. I will take that most of the time. But then there was the game after that. Then we get into the Dodgers series. That was a little bit messy. It was pretty good in the first game, where the Dodgers got to Shota, and then that was one where Brad Keller gave up 5 runs, 4 earned in a third of an inning. But then that would be all they would give up. So after Brad Keller came in and was not able to clean up Imanaga's inning, and the Dodgers had 10 runs, after that, Ethan Roberts threw a scoreless inning. Gavin Hollowell threw that big scoreless 2 innings I referenced earlier. And then Porter Hodge came in and got the win in the last inning. So after that, when the Cubs were trying to come back, the bullpen did lock down. So it's very easy to look at that and say, well, the bullpen threw 4 1/3 innings, 3 hits, 4 runs, walked 2. Team got the win in spite of the bullpen. I could make an argument the Cubs kind of got that win because of the bullpen. Not because of Brad Keller on that day, but in that game, the Cubs bullpen locked it down. You go to the next game against LA, and that one, the Cubs won 7-6. And in that game, let's go to the box score. The Cubs wound up taking a 7-5 lead in the 5th. And we look at the line for that day. Sorry, that's the Dodgers. Let's look at the Cubs line for that day. Matthew Boyd gave up the first 6 runs. Only 3 of them were earned. He had a bit of a rough one, but because of some errors, only 3 were earned. And then the bullpen came in and did absolutely lock it down. Danny Palencia with a scoreless 7th. Julian Merriweather with a scoreless eighth, and that's the game where Ryan Presley was down. Porter Hodge came in and got the save in the ninth. So in that game, they went 3 innings, gave up no runs, 1 hit, no walks, 4 strikeouts, and locked down the win. First game of the Phillies series, the Cubs win 4-0. The Cubs bullpen was able to come in and throw 4 innings, gave up 2 hits, 2 walks. So a whip of 1 for that day, which was fine. They didn't get themselves in much big trouble, 5 strikeouts, and did not give up a run. Cubs get the win. In the Saturday game against Philly, the Cubs lost 10-4. That's one of those games that was just kind of lost early. So Ben Brown did not have his stuff. He threw well for a couple innings, then kind of fell off. Went 3 2/3, 9 hits, 6 runs, walked 1, struck out 5. So the bullpen didn't do a ton after that. Pomeranz made his first appearance, was scoreless in 1 1/3. Ethan Roberts did give up 4 runs in 2 innings, but at that point, the Cubs were down big. That's one where you're not burning guys. If that had been a closer game, Ethan Roberts probably doesn't throw 2 innings and give up 4 runs. So that's one where the Cubs bullpen went 5 1/3, gave up 3 hits, 4 runs, 2 walks. Yeah, that was more about efficiency. The Philly actually didn't do a ton against the bullpen, but they got those 4 runs off Roberts, and that's really what stuck. And then we have the game on Sunday where, I already walked through it, but the Cubs were really locked down until they got to Merriweather, who didn't have his command that day. So it's easy to say the bullpen sucks. The bullpen is bad. The bullpen needs an overhaul. But when you really get down into it, it's very situational. A lot of these games where the Cubs have lost have been games where the offense doesn't support. This is something also that I made the point a lot the last 2 years. The Cubs bullpen was losing a lot of close games, but those close games were often 3-2, 2-1, 1-0, where sure, the bullpen gives something up late. Maybe they blow a save. Maybe the Cubs have a 2-1 lead going into the ninth, and they lose 3-2. Yeah, that loss is on the bullpen, but the Cubs also only scored 2 runs. Now, that's saved them a bunch of times this year. There have been some games where the Cubs bullpen was not good. The Arizona game, that Dodger game, there have been several where the Cubs offense has just come back and done more things after the bullpen lays a bit of an egg. But this bullpen's worth continuing to watch. I still think this bullpen can wind up being a strength. I don't love the way Presley's throwing, but he's looked better of late. He's gotten more swing and miss. So I'm hoping he can find, what he's been in the past with the Astros. I do like the way Porter Hodge is throwing. Porter Hodge is also a great example of a guy this little into the season. Don't just look at that ERA. Don't look at that ERA of 5.27 and say, oh, he's having an awful year. He's actually looked really good, and he's been really dominant in some big games. So that's all worth checking out. The Cubs are still going to have to do more. They're going to have to add bullpen at the deadline, almost certainly. Almost every contending team does. The Cubs are going to continue to look at the waiver wire. They're going to look at guys who are getting released by other teams. They're going to look at guys who are maybe sitting as free agents right now. One I hear a lot of chatter about is David Robertson, who was so good for the Cubs a few years ago and has been good, but somehow, inexplicably, I know he's 40, but there are guys in this league who are old and still pitching. I think with Robertson, it's been about price tag. Did not happen in spring training. So now if the Cubs were to sign him today, he's probably a month away from pitching in games because I'm sure he's been keeping himself in shape, throwing, doing regular bullpens. There's going to be a ramp up period. There's going to be a minor league rehab, effectively a rehab stint, but there's going to be a get your season started like spring training kind of thing before he'll come into a game. We saw it with Craig Kimbrell. The Cubs signed him in June back in 2019, and he really struggled at first before really settling in. So there are moves the Cubs can make. The Cubs might make some trades in the margins. It was June last year when the Cubs traded for, maybe it was May, the Cubs traded for Tyson Miller, picked up Jorge Lopez off waivers. The Cubs will find some guys. They'll continue to look and scour that market. They still have some interesting guys in Iowa. I mentioned Tom Cosgrove earlier, another lefty that they've pulled up. So the Cubs now have 3 lefties in the pen with Teobar, Pomeranz, and Cosgrove. We'll see what they're going to be. But right now, as far as the big relievers who might be on the market, if you're going to go, there's no obvious Aroldis Chapman this year that's kind of available at the trade deadline. But at the same time, there's always a closer or 2 or 3 available at the deadline for you to go get. I'm not sure if the Cubs are necessarily going to need a closer. We'll see what happens with Presley and with Porter Hodge, but the Cubs are going to need more depth in that bullpen. So hopefully guys either step up or the Cubs will do that. Or we may find bullpen help by the Cubs going and getting a starting pitcher to replace Justin Steele, slotting everybody else down. Maybe that puts Ben Brown back in the pen. And maybe Ben Brown, maybe we see him become kind of a power arm at the back end of the pen where he can just come in. He doesn't have to worry about going 5. Just come in, cut loose for an inning or 2, and most of them guys down. The stuff is still tremendous. It's a matter of just putting it together, being consistent, getting those things done. But this bullpen could still be a strength. Let me know what you think. Hopefully the Cubs go into Pittsburgh and win this series and get May off to a good start. The Cubs' schedule in May is much, much weaker than it was in April. And so what the Cubs need to do is just continue to hit the ball, continue to pitch as well as they can. And if they can play like they played in April against May's schedule, I think the Cubs are going to remain in first place. I think the Cubs are going to be the team to beat in this division. But we'll get back into it. I'll talk to you guys again next week. Go Cubs. Thank you for joining me today. If you like this episode, please drop a rating and a review wherever it is you get your podcasts, and share the episode with a friend. Just a few seconds from you gives me great feedback and helps other Cub fans find the show. You can find me on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, Threads, Blue Sky, and YouTube, all at CubsPS+. And check out the Patreon page at patreon.com/BlucherBunch to help support all our shows. As always, the theme music for this podcast is Prospect Park West by Jerry McCoy. This is Mike Waller, host of the Cubs PS Plus podcast. Every day with Cubs baseball or talking about Cubs baseball is a great day. Go Cubs!